Just days after a 36-year-old aide to the vice president turned down an offer to be White House chief of staff, President Trump claims to have more candidates for the job than he can handle. Telling Reuters last night, quote, "I have at least 10, 12 people that want it badly. I'm making a decision. Great people," Trump said. Sorry, I can't help the imitation.
If by none, you...
If by none, you mean 12.
12, yeah, then, yeah, 12 people.
I could do it immediately. I'm in no rush. A lot of people want it. Everybody wants it. Who doesn't want to be one of the top few people in Washington, D.C., Trump said, gesturing to the three reporters interviewing him. I mean, you three guys would take it.
No.
No. He goes on, "I have so many people, I cannot interview them all," he said. My God. Turning to the senior communications advisor, Bill Shine, Trump asked, "Is that a correct statement?" And Shine agreed. What else is he going to do? The current chief of staff, John Kelly, will remain in the job through at least January 2nd. At least, but perhaps longer.
Perhaps longer.
Because they might not find anyone. But again, that poor guy, he just wants out.
You know, anyway, let's bring in right now, fresh off that wide-ranging Oval Office interview with President Trump, White House correspondent for Reuters, Jeff Mason. He's a former president of the White House Correspondents Association. And Jeff, thanks for being here. I understand Rick Santorum turned it down on TV last night.
Yikes.
I mean, everybody, it's just, it is a miserable time to be inside that White House.
Available.
It's going to be a very tough position for the president to fill with anybody who's effective. Tell me, what was your take on the president and his mindset yesterday when you were talking to him?
Well, first of all, I guess I can confirm that the three Reuters reporters, myself and my colleague Steve and Roberta, are not taking the job of chief of staff. But he was in a good mood, honestly, and it was just a couple hours after that, really raucous meeting with the Democratic leadership. He was pretty calm. He answered our questions about a whole range of issues, including the chief of staff, but also about China and about impeachment. He seemed like he was not in a harried mood. He was happy to chat.
So let me ask you, what's next? What is the feeling around the White House? What's the feeling around the press corps about what comes next for this president?
Well, I mean, the chief of staff piece of that will be huge because he's coming into a year, 2019, in which he'll be faced with Democrats controlling the House of Representatives. He's faced with all these legal challenges. He's faced with these political challenges. So it'll depend a lot on who ends up leading that ship or steering that ship. And he said, as you just mentioned, he has 10 to 12 candidates for that job. It will also depend a lot on how China trade talks go. One of the things that he talked about with us yesterday is that he's willing to potentially intervene in the case of the Huawei CFO who was detained, if that would be helpful to a trade deal. And that's a pretty big story that's something he's considering doing. He also said, I asked him specifically if he was worried about being impeached, and he said, no, I'm not concerned.
Jeff, the several members of the American intelligence community, as well as audio tapes and intelligence assessments around the world, have concluded that the Saudi Crown Prince was certainly playing a key role in the assassination of Khashoggi. When that came up yesterday, the President of the United States maintained his position, did he? That, he doesn't care.
Well, he didn't say he didn't care, but we asked him if he thought that the man known as MBS was responsible for Khashoggi's death, and he said he wouldn't go into that. We asked him if standing by Saudi Arabia as an ally meant standing by the Crown Prince, and he said yes. For now, that's the case, and that the Crown Prince is fully in power in Saudi Arabia. So he has not wavered at all on his commitment to the Crown Prince, which is something that he's come under quite a bit of criticism for from Republicans and Democrats, as you know.
John Heilemann, I'm just wondering, and you can take it to Jeff, but if the display yesterday has any hope of showing those who think this president might even be able to handle our allies or our enemies at these foreign meetings that he goes to, that he clearly doesn't have the skills, let alone the support, the skills to handle a conversation with any type of sense of how to actually get a goal completed. I think yesterday might have been devastating. I'm not sure the president understands that, but perhaps Republicans do?
Mika, I don't know. I don't think that if you look back over the course of the last couple of years, there have been plenty of demonstrations of Trump's weakness as a negotiator. There have been few that have been quite as vivid as this one. And I
one
would
was big.
I would say that, as much as anything, and this I'll throw this to Jeff in a second, but as much as anything, not only did it demonstrate the deficits that he has as a negotiator.
Yeah.
With foreign adversaries and others on the international stage, but it would make me worried if I was on his legal team. It would demonstrate why I don't want that man in a room with Bob Mueller or with Bob Mueller's prosecutors, because if Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi can bait him and get him back into a corner the way he did and cause him to lie and corner himself that way, can you imagine what would happen if Donald Trump actually testified in front of Bob Mueller and his team? And Jeff, that leads me to the questions you asked him yesterday about impeachment. The president, to have a president at this stage, even before Democrats take control of Congress, openly addressing the question of impeachment struck me as rather remarkable. But just give us your sense of what his body language was as he discussed the matter with you, and some of the things that he said in the interview when you raised the question.
Sure. Yeah, and it is surreal to have to ask a question like that when you're sitting in the Oval Office, but it is a reality for the president going into 2019. His body language and his demeanor was confident. I mean, he believes very strongly that he has done a great job as president. He cited the accomplishments that he's most proud of, including the Supreme Court, getting other judges appointed and approved, regulation, the economy broadly. So he says, it'd be pretty hard to impeach somebody who's done such a great job and who's done nothing wrong.
All right. Thank you so much, Jeff Mason. Greatly appreciate you being with us.
My pleasure.
So, Willie, it's very interesting. Yesterday, when you look at what happened yesterday, Mika was talking about the world stage. I was watching the show yesterday, watching you guys talk to Richard Haas, who, of course, by the way, is 5 holiday tips for barbecue.
Wow. Great stuff.
You mean World in Disarray?
No one thinks
The
ribs
recipe
around
book?
the holiday, but Richard Haas,
No.
he's got a recipe for every season.
Can I
Amazing.
correct you? Until Richard's segment yesterday, nobody used to think
That's right.
about ribs
Now everybody does.
around the holidays. Now everybody does. Everybody does. But anyway, you look at your discussion about the chaos worldwide, what's happening. Theresa May, not only does she have a vote of no confidence today, she couldn't even get her car door open yesterday to meet Angela Merkel. You look at what's happening in France. Macron is unpopular. It can be riots in the streets of Paris. Our closest allies are undergoing such terrible times, and they have Donald Trump losing it in the White House. The timing for Western democracies, for Donald Trump's performance yesterday could not have been worse against a backdrop of the problems that our Democratic allies are having across Europe.
Yeah, Richard said yesterday what we used to know as the West, talking about the United States and Western Europe, is effectively on fire when you go all the way across from Germany and Italy, and you go up to France, which literally is on fire. And then today, as you point out, Joe, a huge no confidence vote for the Prime Minister of Great Britain, Theresa May. She could, by the end of the day, be out of office. She could be out of a job. There could be a replacement in the Conservative Party and a new Prime Minister coming very soon. So you put all that together with what's happening here, and I think Richard's right when he says the world is in disarray, Mika.
Yes, it is. Coming up, Michael Cohen is set to learn his fate today in a Manhattan courtroom. We'll bring in Vanity Fair reporter Emily Jane Fox, who's got new details on what comes next for the president's former fixer. Morning Joe's back in a moment.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.